So, would you say that we're music aficionados?
I like to think so.
Good, maybe that'll give some credit for the rest of this episode. This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler
And Chris.
Today, I thought it'd be fun to switch gears and to prove to my wife that I can talk about something other than Star Wars. But today, we're going to discuss bands or artists that have discographies worth exploring. Either people you've heard of, know their hits, but don't know their back catalog, or maybe someone you've not heard of that we think is worth going over. We've got a huge list, so might all make it in this one episode. This could easily be a series, so let us know when we're done with this what you guys think. Should we keep going or not? Me kick it off?
Yeah.
All right. I think I have to start where my music fascination started. When I was 3, 4, maybe, my dad had this Black Sabbath cassette. I think it was Paranoid. And he would take me driving around in his little blue Ford Ranger through the mountains to see all the sights and stuff. And he would play that cassette for me. And when that slow, steady thump of the bass drum, then that droning guitar from Iron Man started, I was hooked.
Yeah, that's otherworldly.
Yeah, 3-year-old me jamming out to Black Sabbath. And I think everyone knows Paranoid, Iron Man, maybe Heaven and Hell, and I'll throw NIB in there too. But I think the rest of their catalog deserves a listen. They got a lot to choose from. Granted, the Dio stuff isn't as iconic as when they were with Ozzy, but I don't blame Dio for that.
Yeah, Black Sabbath is one of those, yet again, a weird band that has like a really weird, varied history because they've had, 3 main lead singers. Ozzy's kind of come and gone from time.
Yeah, I know they had Ozzy, then Dio, and I think Ian Gillan from Deep Purple was their lead singer for a while. Then I think Ozzy came back for like a reunion album. But yeah, for someone that started the heavy metal genre, like I think their entire back catalog is at least worth going through a little bit there.
Yeah. The Ozzy stuff is more iconic, easily, just because he's got such a strange voice and this presence. And that's the group. But when I think of Black Sabbath, I think of Ozzy.
Yeah. I think the issue with Dio is he's got his own ideas and didn't get to utilize them. And it was such a big shift from Ozzy to Dio. So I think tonally wise, maybe that's why.
Yeah. When I think of Dio, I think of more like Iron Maiden and what's his name? Bruce Dickinson?
Yeah.
That like he just loved to write. The lyrics were really important to him and he would write these novels or whatever. And I knew this guy in high school that was from Switzerland. He was an exchange student and he was really an Iron Maiden, and he would always be like, the text is so important, you've got to read the text. And I was like, I really don't want to read Iron Maiden's lyrics. But that's what I think of when I think of Ronnie James Dio, is like he's got this amazing voice.
Yeah, he's 5'3" with a 10-foot voice.
Is he that short?
Oh yeah, he's
really
little. Yeah,
that's crazy. Represent for anybody who knows me in real life.
But there must not have been a lot of bad blood there, because they reunited like years later under the name Heaven and Hell and toured doing just the Dio years. Yeah.
Was it all of the Black Sabbath crew?
Yeah.
Geezer Butler?
Yeah, Geezer, Bill Ward, Tony. Yeah, I think this was like a few years before Dio's death. Yeah, side note about Ronnie though. When he was recording his lines and vocals for Tenacious D's Pick of Destiny, they said that he showed up at the recording studio with his own microphone. And they're like, man, you didn't have to do that. It's like this guy that we've got, I don't remember the producer's name, but he's like real big in the industry, had like all the newest equipment. And he's like, yeah, let's try this first. Dio blew his mic out. And so they're like, all right, let's get my other mic. It's bigger, more powerful. Dio blew it out. So he had to have his own custom mic that he brought in for recording because his vocals were too powerful that he blew out 2 microphones beforehand.
He does not need a microphone. His voice is powerful.
For sure.
So, what are your favorite songs? And do you have favorite songs from every era?
It's hard to say, just because I don't always remember what songs come off which albums and which albums came before what albums.
Yeah.
So that's hard to say. But I mean, of course, like all the hits, always good to go through. That opening bass line from NIB is fantastic. Been trying to learn that one myself to varying degrees of success. But I think for stuff that people don't go to first, Children of the Grave is a good one.
What album's that on? Do you know? I mean, you can look it up on YouTube and it'll just be that song. I'm just grilling you because I actually don't know as much about Black Sabbath as I sometimes think. And sometimes I forget which, I mean, when Ozzy started doing stuff on his own and he had, Zakk Wylde later, and I'm spacing on
Randy Rhoads.
Randy Rhoads, yeah. That's a very different style from Tony Iommi, like Tony's got this like hard, it's a more rigid edge and a bit more stilted. Not to say that better or worse or whatever, whereas like Randy Rhoads and later on Zakk Wylde had this, it's more fluid, I think is one way to put it, more free form.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the distinguishing there too, is even though we think of Ozzy as the front man and like the iconic run of Sabbath and then like his solo stuff, Tony and Geezer wrote most of Black Sabbath stuff. Mm-hmm. And Randy wrote most of Ozzy's solo stuff. Mm-hmm. And the other guy whose name escapes. But yeah, I think Ozzy only wrote a handful of songs, if that much. So that's why you get varying degrees of Ozzy.
Yeah, it's just his presence is so potent and so obvious. This brings up, I want to interject something. Like I have this band that I was really into in my teens. It's kind of embarrassing for me now. It's not a boy band. It was a man band. It's America's hometown band. Aerosmith. I became a really big fan of. That's as bad as for me now as NSYNC would be. But one of the reasons why I fell away from them was, I mean, I started growing out of it. I felt like I graduated. It's some of the best riff rock that, like two guitar players. If you just strip away everything else, it's some of the best guitar work, like through their however long they played. Then going into, after the 90s, they had a huge successful like revival to their career. Going into the 90s and after that, they were doing less. And Steven Tyler, the lead singer, ended up on American Idol, yeah. I almost said America's Got Talent. And he had to stand there, or sit there, and tell people no, or give them critiques on who could be a singer or whatever. Where he grew up in a time where you had people like Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, Ozzy, and some of these people maybe could have, but I think about Tom Petty especially. He's this good old boy who wrote some of these songs are like the soundtrack to our lives in high school, riding around after school, going to the mall, going to get pizza. You think about that. Like, what's on the radio? What did somebody have on a mixtape when they put it in? Yes, we made those mixtapes, then mixed CDs. Some people even had specific driving soundtracks they made. Tom Petty wouldn't have made it past the audition day for American Idol. And neither would Steven Tyler, by the way. So for him to have to tell people that, I felt like was a betrayal, not just to the music community, but to anyone who had ever idolized him. Because with so much, especially the rasp and the vocal fry, I think is the technical term, to his voice, yes, he has an amazing range. He can hit notes like you wouldn't believe, and still can. A lot of people, like Elton John, amazing basic singer. He has this good voice, but it has shifted drastically over time. He's gotten more baritone from when he first started in the mid-60s. Almost sounds like a different guy singing. Steven Tyler can still hit all those high notes now live. Yeah. It's crazy. Would he have made it past any if he came in and did Walk This Way or Sweet? Pick any favorite Aerosmith song. And that brings me to like Ozzy. What were your band you're talking about? Crazy singer, man. Yeah. And like so unique. I don't want to name me the 10 people who won American Idol and what they did afterward.
I can name you more people that lost American Idol
and they've had more success. Yeah. The people who win, it's like, good for you. You have a great voice. It's a game show to me though. It's not a talent show, even though they say that. It's TV, and that makes me mad that Steven Tyler went on there for money. I don't that I know him or whatever, but I lost respect for somebody who I had an amount of respect for on a certain level, personal level. That guy's weird, but like he's pretty crazy, and has done some pretty questionable things in his life. So I'm distinguishing the art from the artist on this one. If anybody knows anything about Steven Tyler and is like, yeah, he's a piece of shit in every other way too. Okay, not talking about that. This is all just on this level. Ozzy always been controversial and owns it. So so that's also a completely different thing. But what an amazing voice and presence, and loves his fans. I don't know what else to say about that. The music speaks for itself as well.
I still don't understand how when Ozzy speaks, you can't understand a damn thing he says. But once he gets in front of the microphone,
it's a different part of your brain. People who have been stroke victims that can't speak anymore, they can still sing. And you can sometimes communicate with them through song. Or like if you can just get them to realize that they can do that, they'll sing Happy Birthday and then they'll join in singing Happy Birthday. It'll make them think, oh, I can still sing. And then they can communicate through song because it's a different part of the brain. And then that can bridge the gap to them relearning how to speak if it's that severe. There's all sorts of science to this that I cannot explain because this is what I do and not neurology. So I just like to watch documentaries. So I think that is why. So, hilarious though, and yeah, doesn't stutter at all when he's singing. So
another thing I'd say for Black Sabbath is, especially when you go back and listen to their interviews from like when they started, it's kind of inspirational almost, because it's like they didn't have a lot of money to do this stuff. They're like, oh, what kind of strings did you use? The ones that were already on it, because we couldn't afford new ones. So that's why they got such a unique sound, because Geezer Butler was playing with dead strings. I assume Tony was too. They're like, how often did you change? Just if it broke, and that was it, because they didn't have money to buy new strings.
Yeah.
So they just took what they had and essentially birthed a new genre. And I know people will argue there's people before Sabbath that may have had that heavy metal influence, but there's a reason we know the name of Sabbath and not these other guys. I heard someone say you can argue that metal came before Sabbath, but you can't argue that it didn't come after, because everybody from them stems from that to some degree.
Yeah.
Especially like with more modern takes, I say Ghost is probably more directly influenced by Black Sabbath. They kind of got that feel to me.
Mm-hmm. Like classic and new at the same time. And it also feels they have a pretty hard 80s edge too, at least with some of the other theatrics and some of the other stuff they add. I can't remember. I don't know. How much organ did Sabbath use?
I don't think they used a lot, at least on their earlier albums. Maybe a little bit later they had some. Again, going back to just use what they had, which was
what's available, what's there.
I think even for that opening solo to NIB, Geezer said he didn't have his own pedal. He borrowed Tony's wah to get that sound, and then that was it.
Crazy. What a time. I wasn't there. I remember getting that album too. I got it used at Hastings, and I hadn't actually, I knew the hits from the radio, but I didn't know the rest of it. I was still in high school, so putting that in, and it wasn't what I was used to listening to, especially like, you know, more modern metal like Metallica. Even defining that, people get pretty emotional about what is metal, what is heavy metal, and you know, because like if you ask your preacher down the road,
man, that's something
like,
I don't get.
Blues Traveler is heavy metal.
It's like you got so many metal snobs, but yet metal is like one of the most inclusive genres. It's like you can combine any other genre with metal and have something really cool. You can't do that with everything else. It's like, so why shut those gates, man? Just listen to what you want to listen to.
See, I don't think of, and I think most people would agree with me, like Guns N' Roses as being heavy metal. I think they're more rooted in like a classic rock kind of sound that would have been from around that time. A more harder edged version of the Rolling Stones. And they have a lot of influence from Aerosmith as well. And what defines that? Is it more palm muting? Is it more direct riffs? There's so much that goes into defining that. Can you understand the singer? Does the band logo look like you peeled an orange and took the veiny bits and just laid it out? If it doesn't, you might not be listening to metal. But yeah, whatever you define as metal is fine with me. I don't really care. I don't think of Guns N' Roses as metal. I'm saying other people would say it's usually outsiders, or it's kind of like pornography in that, bleep that, but I know it when I see it. You know, like this is metal. Even though a lot of Black Sabbath is either, you know, kind of funky or even like slower, or even like going back and forth, which I think that's another signature thing, is changing time signatures. Yeah. I think that maybe they did that. I don't know. I'd have to do some research, but they did that a fair bit, like with what's it?
War Pigs.
Yeah, War Pigs. All the changes in that, amazing. I've been listening to the Arctic Monkeys lately, so I've been hearing that from that completely different thing, how they lifted that out for a completely different genre. If you haven't heard that version, I highly recommend it. You'll feel conflicted. Like, this is a good song, but what the just happened? Especially if you're like an old school rock fan or metal fan.
Yeah, that reminds me. Sarah says I'm weird for this, but I'm like, yeah, what's your like go-to karaoke song? Just like impromptu, you have to get up, you have to do karaoke.
Are you asking me?
I mean, kind of. Sarah said I'm weird because I've already got like 5, like off the top of my head.
Oh, that you have that many?
It's like I just got them in my back pocket.
The last time I did Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting by Elton John, and that's
something like, yeah, War Pigs. It's my
War Pigs is yours?
Yeah, I put it in my top 5.
That 7/8 time signature screws me up. Just playing guitar on it. What are the 5 then? I could probably pick 5 David Bowie songs easily, and those would, because I know Bowie so well that I could easily slip into that.
Yeah, I know we're going off topic, but yeah, you want top 5?
Yeah.
Soft Cells, Tainted Love, War Pigs, Black Sabbath, Chris Isaak's Wicked Game. Maybe I don't have 5 off the top of my head.
Okay, well, those are, I'm not going to say you're weird for having those, for having songs picked out. I'm just going to say the songs themselves are things I never would have thought. That's the weird thing. Did Sarah have some?
Oh, no, she says that I'm weird for even bringing that question up.
I hate karaoke. I don't like the concept of it. I believe it loosely translates to dead orchestra, and I think that perfectly describes it. If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me, please. But that's what I heard. I think I heard that from Top Gear, from Jeremy Clarkson, who easily could have been with everybody, because I didn't go back and double check him. Not to say I've been to plenty. Don't get me wrong. People have dragged me to them, and I know they exist in places, and I want to smash my head. I used to know this guy who would go practice singing by doing this on nights that he wasn't performing, and he was a multi-instrumentalist and was in a lot of different bands and did professional recording, and he would go do karaoke just to get exposure and sing. And I was like, we could go anywhere else. I mean, you could go to an open mic or something and just play a few songs. It just feels sad. I guess because I was into music so much and knew so many people who were playing and taking it seriously and writing their own music, whereas not everybody is. Some people just work a 9 to 5 and they have a passing interest or love for like just turning on the radio, and they can sing a little and want to have a few drinks and have fun. So why do I hate joy? Gosh, I don't know. Why am I such a big David Lynch fan? Do those two things have anything in common? Maybe that's a question for my therapist.
I was going to say, the more you drink, the more appealing karaoke sounds, though.
Well, we'll go. So there's plenty to choose from in town, so we'll go. You name the night.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Before I run out all the time, what's your pick?
The band that I was going to discuss, and I'm glad that we didn't necessarily do I thought this was, when we just talked about doing this, it was going to be like a rundown of the albums and songs doing like a little mini review of the history, not just a more general talk. But my band that I was going to start with is Queen.
Good pick.
That was, for me, my personal story with Queen. I don't remember. I probably told this story because it has to do with Highlander, and we talked about Highlander early on in the show a fair bit, almost a year ago, getting close to a year ago. Right? It was, before then I was listening to just tapes that my mom and dad had laying around, the Jackson 5, Elvis, Beach Boys, Beatles, some Beatles, I think, and later Michael Jackson as well. Then a lot of the people in school, what was popular at the time was rap, like the pop, what I can think of as like pop rap. MC Hammer, not Run DMC. Run DMC was popular, but like that was if you were actually cool, like, because that felt more real. MC Hammer felt like the Backstreet Boys of rap, and Vanilla Ice was really big, and Snow, I believe his name was Snow. The guy did Informa. Nope, go look it up. All right. Maybe it was in a different language, or maybe it was just indecipherable. I think he was Canadian. This isn't about snow, though. And Informer, the smash hit, which you can listen to now. Then I watched an episode of Highlander, and I heard that song, the Princes of the Universe, which is only a small portion of like a 6-minute song. So I had to hear the rest of it. Bear in mind, this is pre-internet days, so couldn't just look it up. I had to wait until Highlander came back on a week later or whatever, watch another episode, wait for the credits to figure out what band that was, and then go and buy that out. This was a weeks long process, not 1 week, multiple weeks that had, for like a 10 or 11-year-old kid, this was a lengthy process. Like if you hear something now, I Shazam it.
Yeah.
That's the app I have. If I hear something and I'm like, oh, that was the Small Faces. Okay, I'll have to put that on a list for later. And then you go to YouTube and it's like that. It all happens instantaneously, and I don't know what that's doing to our brains, but it's not good, I don't think. So I started working my way through Queen, and the most comprehensive album that I saw that I could get that had the most songs that were recognizable or that I had heard on the radio, or from what little research I'd done from talking to friends and just looking through stuff and talking to somebody at the record store, was Live Killers, their live album, and it's not good. That's just, I thought, Bohemian Rhapsody is on this? Now, for those of you who know this album, if you're listening out there, you know what Queen does when they do Bohemian Rhapsody live, which they always would. After that was a staple in their show. They didn't shy away from it. But for the operatic part, for those of you who don't know, the easy come, easy go, will you let me go? Bismillah, no, we will not let you go. That song, the Wayne's World song, they would just play the record. They just put that on, dun 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 dun, and then it would go into that, and it was the recording of it. I have no problem with this. That's not what I'm quibbling about. Although I really feel like they could have brought out a choir of people and just done like a crazy version of it, and just not even been involved, also, or just do backing vocals with a big group of people. I don't know why no one's ever done this. It really feels like somebody should do this live, and I'm sure somebody has, probably Dresden Dolls or something, or Maynard from Tool has probably done something like this. So on the record, once you pop that tape in, you can't hear it.
Yeah.
It's the song, like up until that point, and then it's like, lightning, easy go, wheeling, Bismillah, no, frightening me, Galileo. And then and then it comes back strong. But I was sitting there playing Sega, listening to this album, and I was extremely disappointed. That is what has led to my hate of live albums. I love listening to live music. I love attending concerts. Although I wish they were all seated events, and that they were all in like whatever kind of seating it is, that it's like ramped.
It's like stadium seating.
So that everyone has a good seat, because if you're at floor seating, unless you're in the first 3 rows and somebody in the front row has a tall ass head, you're kind of screwed. So Queen is a crazy band. All of the members were multi-instrumentalists, except for Freddie, who is like amazing on piano. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit for like his piano work and his songwriting ability, because everybody just talks about like what an amazing performer he was, or how hedonistic he was, and his fashion choices, which have become really iconic, and the voice, which I can also talk about that too. The things that nobody says. But he learned to play guitar a little later. His line that he would like to say, for Crazy Little Thing Called Love, he learned to play guitar, and he would get up and say, "This shitty guitar only knows 3 chords." It was the guitar that only knew 3 chords. Freddie had, even up until his death, he could do things in the studio that either he could not reproduce live, or it was too much of a strain on him. He did have to have vocal surgery at some point. He had nodes or nodules on his vocal cords. And here's the thing. It didn't seem to have... I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not about this, at least. I'm not saying there's something going... that there was somebody else singing for him. Absolutely not saying that. I almost think that he held himself back live.
I would say you almost have to. because if you're having to do a whole set at that level.
And they do world tours. The way bands go on tour now and do a month or something, or like hit major cities. These people did. That's why they're so beloved in like Japan, South America, and all over the world. Their music somehow would transcend language. And a lot of the all over the world, a second language is English anyway, so a lot of the people would know those songs. But they also wrote a song in Japanese, Teo Toriate, and they would, I think, in some places they would go and sing like a Spanish version of something. So they were, understood their audience and not pander to them, but give them the sort of service that they felt they deserved, which only paid back in major ways, because when they went to those places, they actually kind of, and there's a lot of documentaries and interviews where they talk about like it was more difficult breaking into America than it was anywhere else. There were so hometown heroes in England, everything would shoot up straight to the top of the charts whenever they would release something there, of course. And South America, Japan, they remained huge and only got more popular. In America, they had a much more difficult time until the 80s kind of hit, which was arguably their worst era. And their first like 3 albums, people would probably know the least amount of songs from if you're a casual listener. There's some crazy stuff on those though, especially the second album. It's kind of impenetrable unless you're just a music fan who just likes listening to everything. There's some weird stuff on there, and not a lot of what you think of as like classic rock. It's extremely prog and like almost Jethro Tull-ish.
I can see that.
A little bit on the first album has more like rock, and the second album went really weird, like fairy tale, Lord of the Rings inspired kind of stuff. Really weird, but I love it. The third album, Sheer Heart Attack, they start going more into what would be their defining trait, which is a slew of genres all in one album. And from there on, that's what becomes what they're known for, doing your standard rock. So they have their hits, and I don't think that's planned that way. I think that's just how they'd write. Like, we're a rock band, we're gonna have some rock song, but we're also pretty weird, so we're gonna do some weird songs too. All of the band members all wrote songs that all ended up on the charts. Even John Deacon, the bass player, he didn't sing. He's the only one who didn't actually sing at least some of his own songs. Freddie sang songs from all the members and his own. All of the members also sang some of their own songs at some point or another. I'm in Love with My Car was the drummer, which I think it's a nightmare to play drums and sing at the same time.
Yeah.
But he did. The drummer also played guitar. Not ever too much, I think, on a Queen album, but he had his own solo albums that he would play guitar on. He was the front man. So, and I think he was big in Germany.
John Deacon might not have sang any of his stuff, but his bass lines were catchy as hell.
Yeah. I mean, run down the list. The most notable is Another One Bites the Dust. Anybody who is listening that was like,
and
I forgot
Pressure.
that. Under Pressure is a huge one for David Bowie was on that with them. Probably a million stories just about that recording session alone, and a million different remixes. Don't look those up. Just listen to the original song or a revamped version. They never performed it live together, but there are edits where David Bowie has performed it live with other people, allowing usually a female vocalist to do Freddie's parts. Some people have edited those together so that there is a live version of Freddie and David Bowie together. I would recommend that for completion's sake. I think things took a turn with The Game in 1980. They busted into the 80s pretty hard, and The Game's an odd album. I remember when I got it. It's got a song about... Is that the one that has the song about suicide? Let's see here. Well, if I could... Why would it do this? Yeah, that is the one. It's not pro, just to be clear. The song is called Don't Try Suicide. I'm gonna go ahead and say cherry pick on that album. I was actually in a group. We were a duo for a while, and we'd just play recreationally together. This guy, there was no bigger Queen fan that I'd ever met. Now, this was my gateway rock band. This was when I really started getting into music. Like, I devoured Queen, and from there would get into Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith and David Bowie. From there, had listened to David Bowie from listening to this, and it was when I started listening to Guns N' Roses, and these together that I wanted to learn how to play guitar, and went from there and began my foray into music and writing my own songs. So after that, I met other people that had similar interests, and specifically, I had a guitar magazine that had, the cover of the magazine was the cover of Queen 2, which is also, you'll recognize the formation from the Bohemian Rhapsody music video. It's all four of them in a darkened space. In like, their faces are in like a diamond pattern. If that doesn't evoke the image, you can look it up. It's pretty easy to find. I had this guitar magazine that had Queen on it. I had an interview with Brian May. I had this at school, and somebody noticed me reading it and said, you should talk to such and such. They're a big Queen fan. They weren't kidding. This guy, he was into like, it was like nothing but like, he was obsessed with Queen and specifically Freddie Mercury. He had other bands he liked too that I got exposed to from that, but he was all in on Queen. I can be objective about Queen. They were my gateway band, and I always look back fondly on them. I don't listen to them much. I go through a little phase about once a year where I'll go through and pick out all my favorites and have a day where I do that. And I haven't left them behind. They will always hold a special place in my heart, and on an emotional level, on a technical level, I'm in some ways unrivaled. And it's sad, you know, what happened to Freddie, because I think, you know, he got cut down way too soon. If the band was 10 years younger, 20 years younger, they'd be able to treat him. Because we know so, like in the 5 to 10 to 15 years after that, we know so much more about AIDS and how to treat it. There's so many people that are just living with it now. So it is so sad that he was like, not the first casualty of AIDS, but like one of the most notable that really forced people to start paying attention to it. And when he died, he'd kept it a secret. I think he announced it like right before, like right before he died. And if I'm getting any facts like vaguely wrong, I apologize. I'm going based on memory from some of this stuff. In some of their last music videos they were working on, it was revealed only later. He was wearing like a tracksuit, sweat clothes underneath the clothes he was wearing to fill out, to make him not look like he was so deathly gaunt, which you could see in his face anyway. And he'd shaved. He'd held a mustache, really thick, manly mustache for a really long time. And so he shaved, and he was clean shaven for the first time in a long time. So that altered his appearance pretty drastically there. And they didn't tour, I think, like the last two albums. I think A Kind of Magic was their last one. Innuendo, the band knew. It was clear there was something going on. If you look at the songs, there's some songs in there that are heavier than they have been in the past, and kind of foreshadowing what's going on behind the scenes. And then Made in Heaven, I don't have mixed feelings about it. I don't like the album. I don't think the songs are good. I'm sorry. It's, you know, compare that to Black Star. Compare that to David Bowie's Black Star. David Bowie knew he was dying, and he knew he was dying for a while. He had liver cancer, and he didn't tell anybody either. All that came out after he died. He did not announce it, like, period. It was just like David Bowie died, and here's what happened. Like, oh, he just released this album. He just had this musical. I listened. That album is about death. Now it makes sense. Like 2 days later, you're like, oh, yeah, he was telling us. Like, it's literally in Lazarus, he says, look up here, I'm in heaven. And when he's actually alive, you think, oh, you metaphors and all. But he was on death's doorstep. He wrote the musical that was a sequel to The Man Who Fell to Earth, or at least his version of it, the movie version. And I think that was a love letter. His parting gift to his daughter. I think the album, they're tied, there's some Venn diagram overlap there. I think the album was to his wife. I think those were his parting gifts. That's just my opinion. I don't know. No one's confirmed that, and he's not here to tell us. From reading it and seeing the musical and reading the lyrics and seeing what he picked, I think, and it's a broad generalization. I'm sure it's very complicated knowing him. I think it would be, but I think on a basic level, the music was a goodbye to his the musical was a goodbye to his daughter, and the album was goodbye to his wife, and his own personal way of saying I love you to both of them individually. And as a fan, no bigger gift can an artist give than one last burst of songs and creativity to leave us with. The dichotomy with Bowie, he brought people in, and some of them knew and some of them didn't, I think, and they were new people. He brought in like a jazz quartet to play with him and didn't tell his band that he had been using for about 20 years. That hurt some feelings, and I think they have reconciled that and gotten over it largely. But Mike Garson, his pianist, since like 1972 or 3 off and on, firmly since the mid-90s, he had some really hurt feelings about it. From Bowie's perspective, I think he had a certain thing he wanted to get done, and he didn't want those emotions to bog them down. And if those people were in the studio with him, there's no way they wouldn't have known he was dying. With Queen, they knew, and it affected all of them. That's just these guys that they're just a band. They've been a band. It's just the 4 of them, and a lot of times they use the same producer, but I don't think they use the same producer every time. Just 4 guys, and they've maintained this band for so long, and then they find out their friend and singer and colleague and fellow artist is dying, and there's no way around this. It's going to happen. So how much more can we do and make with you while you're here? And it was, again, this is very well documented, but they decided to make the saddest, most least Queen sounding album known to man. A lot of the songs are basically unfinished, and they finished them after he died, and that's why it took a bit longer for the album to come out. Does not sound like Queen in the slightest, unless you take the worst song from every album and then say, like, what if we made an album inspired by this? I might ruffle some feathers, but I swear to God, I will do a listen party. I challenge anybody, any Queen fan, I will do a listen party. You pick out your worst, the best Queen album and Made in Heaven, and we'll listen to them side by side, and I'll say, again, I'm not making fun of what happened to him. That was profound and powerful and extremely sad. And I think about, what would he be doing if he were here now? Because he could so easily be here now. If this diagnosis had taken place even only 5 to 10 years later, he could be here now making music, and they never would have made Made in Heaven, because it wouldn't have been as heavy a situation. It would have been a different album had there been different influences and different events occurring. If you write a sad song when you're not sad, it's in some ways it's not real. Now, if you're that good a writer, you can do that. It can be an experience. But when you have something that is that heavy that's happening to you, when your dad dies, somebody gets diagnosed with dementia, you meet somebody, you talk to somebody, they don't know you anymore, and you grew up with them, and you come home, and it sits in your gut. Like, that person's not dead, but they're dead to me. They've already died. I spoke to them the last time I was going to talk to them already, and I didn't know it. It's like when you walk in and there's a dead body. It's no different when you talk to somebody for the last time and you have to realize, what was it that I said? What was that? And you write a song about that. That's different. Or if you paint a painting or write a play, that is different than if you say, I want to write a sad song because I feel like it, because that's what's in my core to write like, but you don't have what's going on. They could write anything, but when it became real, I think they kind of fell apart in a way that led their writing down that path. It's painful to listen to in 2 ways, because I don't like what's going on here, but it's also the realest they ever got, as opposed to David Bowie's final album, which I think is amazing, but then after what happened, then it becomes painful to listen to. Those words become even more real. Anyway, that's my rundown of Queen, and it sucks because it ends on that terrible note, except it doesn't. They didn't give it up. Such mixed feelings about Brian May, who is also genius on guitar. He's also a genius in astronomy. He knows the science stuff. He built his own guitar from scratch with his dad. They didn't have the money to get a guitar, so they just, because they're geniuses or what the ever, they just got some wood off the side of the road or something and just carved it up and made a guitar, and he plays it to this day. It's been analyzed and examined, and they've made copies of it. Different companies have done this at different times. I have actually met someone who had one. That was actually pretty cool. I think it was a Guild, but I can't remember which brand it was. And I am going to just go ahead and not discuss anything post Freddie's death. That's Queen. That's the end of Queen. It is those 4 members. If those 3 members reunite, and only those 3, that is Queen. That can still be Queen. Other than that, don't bring up Queen. If it's not Freddie Mercury, it ain't Queen.
If we're not going to bring up anything post Freddie, then I think we're missing one big thing: the other theme song that they did.
The other themes,
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon. Yeah, I did forget about that. I really think that James Gunn missed a trick in this last Guardians movie by not using Flash Gordon instead of that Heart song for the introduction of now his name the golden guy.
Oh, Adam Warlock.
Adam Warlock, yes. One of my very different from the comic version. I love Adam Warlock in the comics, and it's pretty strange. We won't get into that. But his introduction in Guardians 3, I think it should have been Flash. That
or at the very least, if not his introduction, when he decides to switch sides. Yeah.
That would have been even, or just play a little bit of it when they first introduce him, but just do the instrumental. Like, don't do any of the music. Then come back for the callback for that later, and then it's triumphant, and then they can have the lyrics and finally get to hear Freddy say Flash. Yeah, they just did the soundtrack. That whole movie is just, they went in to specifically do the soundtrack. The soundtrack for Highlander is basically A Kind of Magic. The album, it was just kind of a singular thing. I don't know if there's another time where this took place. It's the album A Kind of Magic plus, I think, Hammer to Fall, which was on a different album. I want to say The Works. And Freddie around with like New York, New York. In the studio, it was like, that was kind of one of those lost gems, or like a demo or something that fans were always like hungry to get bits and pieces of, that were like rumored to exist. But now in this day and age, a lot of stuff's getting released and remastered, and it's all out there if you want to hear it. I think even a lot of that has been on re-releases or box sets or something. Sometimes it's not complete. There's like stuff where they played around with Michael Jackson, I think. Not a lot of stuff with David Bowie. There's just that one session for Under Pressure, but a lot of unused takes and things. So, yeah, that's Seth MacFarlane. He's pretty well obsessed with Flash Gordon, and he's used it, I think, in both Family Guy and Ted. Ted too.
Both Teds.
Both. I can't remember if I've seen the second one, where they have the actor and he's walking up and then he imagines him in the outfit. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, even Queen crossovers in Family Guy, where Stewie's like terrified of the album cover.
Yes, that. I hope that's still on YouTube. Just the cut down, because it's this B plot to another thing. But I remember watching this for the first time. I fell off the couch laughing. When he's like, he's already destroyed the world, man. What more could he want? And he's so freaked out by that album cover, and they're like, oh, this old thing? Oh, yeah, it's my old Queen album. I felt the same way the first time. I was like, you're flipping through like, okay, it's a group shot, another band shot, okay, the night at the opera, day at the races, kind of, these, logo, almost like a coat of arms sort of, and then you get to that, what the is this? Like, the guy who made Akira do the album cover for them? This is some sort of, like, doom metal anime? I don't know what's going on there. No one ever will unless you do research on it, and I refuse to. So, yeah, I think one of them survived that, but he was going to fall to his death.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Look that up, too, just to say, if you haven't seen the episode of Family Guy we're talking about, it's News of the World Stewie Queen Reaction, something on YouTube, I'm not sure. Maybe we should see if it's on there and link to that. It's this B-plot, too. Brian keeps freaking Stewie out with that album cover because he finds out that he's so scared of it, and it is hilarious. One of the things that really stands the test of time from Family Guy. Yeah, you won't catch me saying anything bad about Star Wars fans on this episode. I don't know why I brought that up. I hope some of the people stop and click like if you've made it this far. Lift me saying that up and put it at the very beginning. We need to start telling people to hit like at the beginning. Just click it. Just click it and leave. Just watch 30 seconds, click like, and go. Are you a small business supporter? Do you do that? We're a small business. We're not even asking for money, but also give us money.
And with that, I think we'll wrap up there. Not even the tip of the iceberg, but we'll be here all day if we don't.
Yeah.
So if you made it with us this far, thank you. As always, like, subscribe, share with your friends. Let us know what bands you think are worth getting into a deeper dive. And if you like this episode, again, this was only the beginning of our list that we even made for this episode. So let us know if you want to maybe revisit this again down the road. We'll see you next time.